When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Yellow Castle. User: X9LP09. Posted December 4th, 1997.
It's strange the things you remember from childhood and the things you don't. For instance, up until I had to start school at the age of 5, you'd never find me without my favorite doll, Oliver. From sun up to sundown, he was my constant companion, and yet 35 years later, I can't for the life of me remember much of him at all. Everything I know about Oliver comes from stories told by my mother. There aren't even photographs of us together. My best friend for half a decade takes up almost no space in my head, but something I glimpsed for at most 30 seconds continues to haunt me to this day. The exact nature of my father's job has always been something I've wondered about. Late-night phone calls would lead to unexplained work trips lasting anywhere from days to weeks. Large, hard-faced men with Illinois accents would pull up in nondescript cars, which they'd leave parked out in front of our house until someone else came to drive them away. Once, when we were living on Asbury Avenue in Evanston, one of the drop-off men, tall and thin with shaggy red hair down to his shoulders, noticed me watching them from the playground in Leader Park. Instead of leaving after making the drop, he sauntered across the street to the jungle gym I'd been playing on until they'd arrived. There was something about the way he looked at me, hungry and challenging, that turned my belly to ice. I couldn't meet his eyes and was barely able to say the words my dad had drilled into me in case any of his coworkers approached me, that I was Rod Gorski's kid and they should get back to work. That day on the playground was the first time I'd had to do it, and though I was looking away, it was impossible to miss the change that phrase brought about in the red-headed man. Stammering, he told me to have a great day, then hot-footed it back to his waiting ride. As young as I was, it was impossible to ignore the implications of that exchange, that my dad may be involved with things and people which were somehow dangerous. After Evanston, we moved north, where this story takes place. The house we moved into was huge and resembled, to my young eyes, a yellow fairy tale castle. Adding to its fairy tale aspect was its location, across the street from Forest Glen Woods. Dad would describe the house to me as being French style, topped by a mansard roof. To this day, I don't know a colonnade from a flying buttress, but I can spot a mansard roof out the corner of my eye from 300 yards. It wasn't our house, nor were we renting it. Rather, we were looking after it for someone, my father's boss, if I had to guess, based on snatches of conversation I heard from my parents when they didn't think I was listening. Since we were there as caretakers, my dad explained on our drive from Evanston there was a different set of rules than I was used to. The two most important being I couldn't play with anything we hadn't brought into the house ourselves, and upstairs was completely off limits. That second point was reiterated in my father's scary voice, the same one he used when talking to people from work. I didn't argue. The Yellow Castle's interior lacked the majesty of its exterior, with furnishings that were nicer than what we were accustomed to, and yet, even to a child, seemed at odds with their surroundings. Big, overstuffed brown couches bumped up against chunky end tables and oil paintings which could have been taken from a dentist's office, all of it suffused with a sour odor of old cigarette smoke. There was darkness there, too, gathering in the corner of rooms like cobwebs no amount of sweeping could wipe away. As for the forbidden upstairs, my father's stern words were hardly necessary to keep me away. There was no gate or door covering access to the stairway, and none was needed. Standing at the bottom, you couldn't help but see that the shadows which smudged their way across our living space had completely furred up the walls leading to the second floor, itself a solid black. Whatever was up there, it was like an infection barely held at bay. And sometimes, like an infection, it gained ground. Dad's travel increased after moving us into the Yellow Castle. When this had happened before, and after that period, Mom didn't have much trouble with it. Living there, however, she felt differently. It wasn't anything she said, of course, more she became nervous and distant. When I began having nightmares, she couldn't even put on more than the barest show of sympathy, something kids notice even more than others might. It led to a feeling of alienation, as if I were alone in that castle. That's how I came to discover that, like many fairy tales, this one also had monsters. In our old house, when Dad left Mom and I on our own, she would tuck me in before going to the living room and watching TV. Often, she would fall asleep in front of the set, and on the occasions when I'd wake up in the night, those faraway voices and flickering blue glow would soothe me, acting as a reminder that Mom was only shouting distance away. It was different in the castle, the muffled speech echoing dully as if it came from another world. Whatever light it might have cast was swallowed up by the stairway which lay between my room and the living room. For the first time in my short life, I began sleeping with my door closed. The creaking of that door is what woke me that first night. It's a moment forever bored into my memory. Shaking off sleep as the hinges groaned, expecting to see Mom. What I saw instead was a partially open door, its white paint so bright in the dim it practically glowed. My eyes adjusted, quickly picking out more and more of my room's familiar shapes until they registered something that didn't belong. A black dome. maybe the size of a basketball, emerging at knee height from the slowly widening space between door and frame. As it invaded further, I could see it wasn't a softball, but a narrow black skull, its eyeless sockets somehow even darker than the room around it. Raising its nose holes upward as if smelling the air, the skull emerged fully, revealing itself to be a battered charcoal skeleton crawling on splintered, bony stumps. My mind was on fire, every higher function rendered useless, my feet pushed against my covers, some survival instinct trying to make me crawl away, except there was nowhere to go. I felt my pajama top bunched, hot and sweaty between myself and the wall. Whatever odor it detected on the air, my fear or something else entirely, the black skull seemed to like it, and I heard a low growl coming from its pitted, half-broken ribcage. It stumped quickly toward my bed, revealing deep, pitted grooves carved into the remains of its shattered face. That animal growl sounded again, and I finally found it in myself to scream, a shrill cry that cut through the night as the thing's jawless, hungry face reached the foot of my bed. Then, in a flash of white, it was gone. Room was brightly lit, my mother standing at the now wide-open door, her eyes agog. Whatever disaffection had wormed its way between us was gone now, and I knew she had seen the same thing I had. She rushed to me, holding me tight.
Subject, ice cream truck. User, MB27L. Posted, August 19, 2000.
They say if you live in a town long enough, it starts to grow on you like mold. First on the boots, then in your lungs, and eventually in your bones. You stop noticing the trains, the sulfur plant, the bitter smell of crushed gravel, and one day you just wake up and realize you're too damn tired to leave. That's what happened to me. I always said I'd get out, make something of myself, go north maybe, Chicago or hell, even Chattanooga, but I stayed. Got pregnant too young, married too dumb, and now I'm back in my daddy's old house, trying to keep the lights on and raise a 6-year-old with more questions than I have answers for. It was hot that day, one of those July afternoons where the air hangs around your neck like wet rope. Caleb was outside, kicking around a busted Tonka truck in the driveway, and I was elbow-deep in dishwater, watching a wasp flirt with the window screen. That's when I heard it. Music. Faint at first, but familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. Not a happy kind of familiar, not the kind that comes with old friends or birthday songs. This was deep-fried nostalgia, warped around the edges. Pop goes the weasel. Slow, sticky, and just wrong, like it had been run through a cassette deck one too many times. I dropped the plate I was holding, and it shattered in the sink like a gunshot. I was out the door before I even knew what I was doing, and there he was. Same truck. Beige with sun-faded decals that looked like they hadn't been touched up since the Carter administration. The paint was peeling and the back bumper hung crooked, but it was the same. Same music, same everything, and there, behind the wheel, was the man I hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades. He hadn't aged a damn day. Still had that slicked back black hair, those aviator sunglasses that hid too much, and a smile that looked like it had been painted on with a blade. He wore that uniform again. Off-white shirt with brown trim, sleeves too crisp for this heat, not a drop of sweat on him. He might as well have stepped out of a time machine and landed right here on my patch of dead grass and busted concrete. And Caleb, my boy, was already at the curb with $1 in his hand. "Caleb!" I shouted, heart climbing into my throat. He turned surprised, eyes wide like I'd caught him sneaking candy. The truck idled beside him, engine purring low like some animal deciding whether to pounce. Before I could get to him, the window slid open and that damn man leaned out, already holding a Choco Taco. "Here you go, Caleb," he said. "Thought you might like this today." I stopped cold. How did he know his name? Caleb reached for it, and I snatched him back by the wrist. The ice cream man just smiled, like he'd expected it. "He's a good kid," he said. "Talks in his sleep, a lot like you did at his age." And just like that, the truck rolled on, slow and smooth, taking the corner without signaling, without looking, without a sound except that broken tune echoing behind it. I stood there a long time, my boy confused and crying, asking why I was mad. I told him to go inside, told him we don't buy from strangers. He said the man wasn't a stranger. He'd been here before. I did not eat that night. I smoked 3 cigarettes on the porch instead and tried to convince myself it was nothing, a lookalike, a coincidence. Caleb could have heard his name from a neighbor. Kids talk. I tried everything short of convincing myself I was crazy, and that didn't feel far off either, but I remembered. Summer of '84, I was 6 years old, just like Caleb. That same music would float down Oakview Lane every day around 3. All of us neighborhood kids would sprint to the end of our driveways like Pavlov's dogs, quarters in hand, bare feet burning on the concrete. The ice cream man always knew what you wanted. You didn't need to speak. First time I saw him, he handed me an orange push-up and said, "Don't worry about the cat. She'll come back." My cat had gone missing the night before, and I hadn't told anyone yet. I never told anyone what he said the next summer either, right before David Keener went missing. David was 8, rode his bike 1 street over and disappeared without a trace. No screams, no clues, just gone. His mom hung flyers for months, even went on the news. Nothing. We all thought it had to be some drifter, a sicko passing through. No one talked about the ice cream truck. I did once, to my mother, and she slapped me so hard I saw stars. "Don't say things like that," she hissed. some things you don't understand. The truck stopped coming after David vanished. We all thought that was that. I buried the memories like everything else from that time. Until now. Until Caleb. The next morning, I called the sheriff's office, told them an ice cream truck had come through and the driver was acting strange. Gave him a description, same as I remembered, though I could hear how ridiculous I sounded as I said it. Man who hadn't aged since the 80s, knew my kid's name, drove a ghost truck playing haunted music. The deputy on the line was polite, but I heard the smirk. "We'll look into it," he said. Click. I started digging through my closet, found the old storage bin with yearbooks, newspaper clippings, and a stack of spiral notebooks I used to write in back when I thought I'd be a writer. There was one clipping from August of '84. Local boy still missing. Police ask for leads. David's face, grainy and off-center, smiled up at me with one missing tooth and sun-bleached hair. I flipped the paper over and scrawled on the back in my own handwriting, probably done during one of my detective phases, "Ask the ice cream man." I did not sleep that night either. Kept thinking about what Caleb said, that the man had promised something special. The next time, he'd let him sit up front, let him help drive. I started locking every window, pushing furniture against the door, told Caleb the truck had moved on, gone to another town, but every day around 3, the same warped tune came creeping down the block again, like it never left. I don't know what he is. Not exactly. I don't think he's human, though. Not in the regular way. But I know he feeds on something. Maybe it's the kids. Maybe it's the grief. Maybe it's just the small town rot that soaks into the bones of people like me who never got out, never will.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.